Yo, what's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to yet again another fantastic indie creator interview. It is your Cape Crusader, Cody, and we are keeping it geekly with our brand new friend, Ryan of DoubleOut. We are breaking down so much awesomeness. Before the interview, I had to start it right away because I'm like, man, we are going to get all this juice just drained before we even start. Ryan, how are you doing? Welcome to the stream today, man.
I'm doing good, man, and you killed that intro right there, and thanks for letting me come on and talk about this. As you know, I was nervous going into this, but I feel pretty comfortable talking to you, and so I can't wait to discuss everything with you.
Yeah, and I every time I talk to someone and they give me a an idea that maybe it's the first time or they maybe they're a little anxious about it, I always tell them no worries. I'm gonna warm you up. I'm gonna get you nice and good. And that's like the pre-talk. When we get everything tested, my quote unquote audio testing is also, it serves as a double-edged blade. It gets you comfortable. We chop it up, we chum it up, so you get kind of warmed up before going into it. I found going into a podcast cold is the absolute worst thing because we're strangers. We don't know each other at that point.
Yeah.
So how's your morning going? I appreciate you waking up bright and early to come hang out with us, man.
It's been good, man. I know you mentioned when we started that 9:30 is early, but I get my workouts in at 5 in the morning. So I've been up all morning. This is like afternoon for me.
I forgot you're a personal trainer, so this is like for me. I got 3 kids. If I don't have to wake up at 6 or 7 to get them ready for school, I'm sleeping in. So it's like 2 different worlds for us.
I wish I could do that, man. I wish I could do that, but for some reason, 1, I can't stay up late at night, but 2, if I wake up later and I work out later in the day, it just feels like I wasted the whole day. There's so many hours that I could have been doing something else. So I've developed getting up a little bit early and going and working out.
Well, 5 a.m. is the magic number. I've read there's a lot of research that goes into it, that it helps waking up that early helps you be more motivated, helps you get more stuff done. You end up being more social with friends and family. I've actually heard something about that, and I'm like, man, if only I could obtain, because I stay up when I'm not doing Keeping It Geekly, I'm doing Job for Cody, which is my Twitch streaming side of things. So last night I was playing the Quarry until 3 in the morning. There's no way me waking up at 8:30 to start getting around in the morning was rough for me. But Ryan, let's start breaking into you. You have a laundry list of things behind you. You are not only a personal trainer, you're a business owner as well. You're coming out with a game pretty soon, and you're creating comics. You just got into the comic scene not too long ago.
Yeah, man. First, I'll start with the comic side of it, as to where it was something that I really wasn't into until about 4 years ago. I kind of sparked up a conversation with Aubrey Sitterson on Twitter one day, and he was talking about wanting to lose weight and kind of get in shape, and I just kind of threw a flyer out there because I followed his podcast called Straight Shoot, which was a wrestling podcast at the time that's no longer around, but I just kind of threw something out there and was like, hey man, what do you want to work on? And I gave him some suggestions, and after we got to talking a little bit, he kind of was talking about his comic projects, and I bought some, started reading them, and I was like, you know what? This is a pretty cool medium. I've always been creative, writing wise, but that hasn't been something that I practiced. And changing from novels to graphic novels was something that I was like, you know what? This is interesting. I may go down that route. So I'm fairly green when it comes to comic books.
So was DoubleOut your first venture into it? Did you do any?
100%.
Wow, that is that is a big undertaking to take on. For right out the gate, a lot of people suggest doing one shots or a couple pages here and there. You're like, nah, dude, we're full sending it.
I went into it I've seen other people be successful doing what they do, and I didn't. This is gonna sound bad on my part. I didn't do any research or anything going into it. I was like, man, I've seen kind of blueprints, and I was like, let's just try it. Let's see what happens. The worst that's going to happen is it's not successful. Issue 1, it got funded. So I'm happy with that. But if it didn't get funded, I would just put it out there for free and just let people see it. Was kind of my takeaway on it. And I was like, I always tell people, because I've got ADD, I bounce from idea to idea to idea. And if I really stick on something for a little while, DoubleOut, I'm like, oh, this must be good, or this one must be worthy to kind of put out there. And so I was like, you know what? Let's just throw it out there, see what happens, and then if people read it, then awesome.
I love to throw it out there.
That was my takeaway.
I love to throw it out there. But that's kind of like Keeping It Geekly. Everyone's like, how are you able to do this and go like do it as much as you do? Like I suffer from the same thing basically. It's a saving grace, but it's also a burden, right? Because like I'll be like trying to edit a podcast and then I'm like, okay, well, let me answer stuff on Twitter real quick. Okay, well, let me look up this podcast real quick. And while I'm editing, I'm listening to a podcast and like I'm like responding back on Twitter. Like, so it helps you like focus. You get that hyper focus, and that's when it's like chef kiss. But like anything outside of that, it's like, oh man, I'm everywhere with this. Like, how are you able to like contain that to continue like pumping out this work? It just seems like it would be like a uphill battle.
What I did, and to go back to me owning my own business and stuff, is I currently work 3 jobs. So like I'm busy throughout the day, and that helps fund what I want to do. And when other creators kind of reach out to me and like ask for advice or ask how to get started with something, I'm like, hey, look at your strengths and weaknesses. Look at those weaknesses in particular, and then pay somebody to do those. Like, I can't do art. You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't do art. I haven't sat down and actually wrote since like 8th grade. And so I reached out to Brian, and I got lucky on that, to where Brian's a killer writer. And he took everything that I kind of told him in stride. I had no idea with comic scripting, anything like that. And, I just took that time and money to go into it to get that started. And now I've developed like confidence to where it's morphed into where we're getting better each issue at a time, and each comic that's going to be coming in the future.
Okay. So what drove you to want to take on darts? I know like sports are like really big in like the manga like scene. So darts seems like it was something that was interesting. That's something I don't think I've really seen a lot of either.
Okay, now this is going to sound kind of strange, but I was watching Brutal Moose. He was live streaming a Shenmue playthrough, and he just kind of offhand said, he was like, it'd be cool. He said a manga in particular, which I am a big fan of manga, but I wanted to do a comic on the first one. He goes, it'd be cool if they had a darts manga. And that's just kind of what started it, to where I was like, you know what? I've got a perfect backstory. And I was like, this could be my gimmick of how to tell the story, was the darts of it. And since I'm more of a Dragon Ball Z fan, so I'm more manga and anime than I am comic book.
I wore the right shirt
movies.
today.
Yeah, 100%. and so like that, to me, I was like, how do I shonen this up? How do I get something to make darts interesting? And so I decided upon this like almost spirit animal like power that people have when they're good at professional darts. And so that's how it kind of manifested and came from that. But the story is much more than darts.
No, I love it. I love it. It seems like so over the top, but just the right over the top that gets you drawn in.
Well, thank you.
So give us a little bit of a breakdown of kind of like the creative process like this. Like when you guys are scripting out the ideas or coming up with the storyboarding, what's that look like? And then what's it look like when you take that to the art side of things?
Okay, well, on my side, it's fairly simple. What I did was take a walk for about 30 minutes each day, and then that's like my scripting. So I just go through it in my head and kind of go over ideas and plot lines and stuff while I'm walking, and that's how I do it. Now, I forget a lot of stuff, so it's probably better to have some notes or something instead of just walking around and thinking out loud. But after that, I would go on and talk to Brian and just be like, here's my plot points, here's what I'm thinking to get there, here's how we're going to get there. And then he just took that and added the personability to it, the dialogues, the all that kind of stuff, to make it to where it's not robotic and we're just going point A, point B, all that kind of stuff. And so that goes back to the strengths and weaknesses things, to where I was like, you know what? I'm not so good at dialogue and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, Brian, here's where I want us to go. How are we going to get there? And he kind of led that way. Now, when it comes to artists, I'm not going to lie to you. That's the hardest part mentally to do, because you've got a picture in your head. So you're seeing the story in your head, even though I'm not an artist, I can't draw, I can't do anything like that. But there was always a preconceived notion. So anytime I got art back, you immediately hate it. Like, you can't turn that off. It's like you look at it and it's phenomenal art. But
you're like, this wasn't what I was picturing.
You're like, this isn't it. This isn't it. And then you sit on it for about a day, and then you look at it again and you're like, you know what? This is it. This is starting to be it. And that's what I love about working with Fernando. Was I even told him straight up, I said, when he asked my opinion, I was like, hate it. And then the next day, yeah, but he got it. Like, he understood. And then the next day I reached back out and I was like, this is it. This is the one. And so we went down that, and there wasn't too many edits. Like I say, it just took me to set on it for a little bit.
You know, he has like a little punch and bag. He has a little punch and bag with Ryan on it. He's
Probably,
like, he hates it.
100%. It's hard because everything, ad-wise, everything I get back art-wise is not what I see up here. But when I see what he puts down to paper, it's better than what I see up here.
So how do you start like working that mentality out? Like, how do you start, like, I guess, like, you know, like working through that barrier?
For me, I've come to lighten up on it a little bit more, just because they're the artist and I'm just the creative guy. Like, I just come up with the ideas. So if I'm gonna go in this wholeheartedly, I've got to trust that somebody else is understanding what I'm trying to go for, and just kind of letting that take its hold. And that took me a long time, to where issue 1 took about 2 years. Issue 2 took maybe 2 months.
Wow.
Like, it was there, because at that point there was an acceptance thing. Yeah, go for it.
I was gonna say, the 2 years, was that like anything due to COVID too?
No. So that one was, one, lack of confidence, and me not knowing what I was doing, but 2, my dad was going through health troubles. You know, he had cancer and everything, and it happened to coincide with COVID, but either way, it was still hard. And I just kind of put it on the back burner. Then you had your depression swings and all that kind of stuff, and it was like, why am I doing this? Why am I, because I paid everything up front, why am I spending all this money? And it's like, this isn't the product that I want. Like, it was just a constant battle in the brain of kind of like, what's worth it? And then after everything kind of settled and going through everything and moving and doing different kinds of things, I was like, now's the time to do it. You know, it just it reinvigorated it to where it was like, maybe I am on the right track. I was doing this for something. So let's finish it out and kind of put it out there as like a project of truly me. You know, like that's the way that I look at it. Is like, everything that I do obscure production wise is purely me and my ideas. And so I'm like, if somebody likes that, cool, but I'm interested in it. This is what I want to read. And so I'm like, you know what, somebody else has got to have that too.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start breaking down the first issue of DoubleOut. You know, who's our main protagonist? Do we see any sort of villain? And kind of like, what is the first issue about?
So in issue 1, we get introduced to our main character, Jin Suzuki. And the way I explain him is kind of like Belmont in the Castlevania series right now on Netflix, to where he's a drunk, down on his luck. He's got his family heritage of, in the Netflix series, his family heritage of taking out Dracula, and you know, he's kind of fighting against that within himself and going to bars and stuff. So with Jin, I kind of took that and made it to where he's a down on his luck. He's an absent father. He's a drunk. He's a gambler, and he had a lot of promise as a kid as a darts player and wanted to go pro, but just how his life kind of laid out, it kind of put that on the back burner, and he's kind of regretful of that. And so what happens in issue 1, after we meet him, he gambles in a darts game in a bar with Blade, and he gets kicked out, and he finds that his son is waiting for him outside there. And his son, you know, vying for his dad's attention, is trying to bring him back home, but that's something that grapples with Jin, because he wants to be a good father to his kid, but in his mind, he's a failure. So he doesn't want to go back into that home until he redeems himself. And so through this story, we kind of see his mental hurdles and everything along the way, and then in comes the villain of the story, Crimson, and he's the leader of the mob in DoubleOut #1 and DoubleOut series. And he's got a gambling debt to him, and so he ends up getting kidnapped, and has a proposition maybe going into issue 2 to get out of that gambling debt.
That is so, yeah, I love this premise so much. Was it hard for you to like write him as like a crap dad, like to put him in that, you know, situation and write those emotions? Because that is like such a deep like situation. So I mean, to like, you know, either like I feel like either having like some sort of like experience in that area or like just like knowing people who were in that, like it's like some of the most beneficial.
Yeah, I knew people in that area that had fathers like that, and I've always looked at it because I'm a real introspective person, and I like to understand how other people think.
Me too.
And
Yeah.
so when it comes to like personal training or anything, when I'm working with a client one-on-one, I truly try to get to know them instead of talking about fitness or anything. I like to know what makes their brain ticks, and over the time, you know, you get different aspects of people's lives, and they talk about their father, they talk about their mother, different kinds of things with life, and I just pull bits and pieces of that and keeping it to where it's really human and close to the heart. And so that's how I kind of developed Jin's thing. But also, like I said early on, the darts was just my gimmick to tell the story. I had this story, like I had Jin's arc, but I was like, what's going to keep them along for the ride and see how he goes, or what's going to carry that? And it ended up being darts just by that one hand comment. But when it comes to Jin, that's the story that I wanted to tell, and I like to compare it to like Rocky 1. So we're kind of going into it. He's down on his luck. He's been boxing for years, but he's just average. And then can he work his way back up and be that kind of guy that he is in Rocky 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up?
Man, I love this so much. I'm a sucker for redemption stories. Like this is so awesome. So how much like change did you see like incorporating darts from the original script to the one that had the dart aspect with it?
Well, when I say that I had the story like written, it was more novel style and down to earth. Like when I was writing it that way was just telling, and I was telling it from the son's perspective when I was writing that. So I was looking at it as the child constantly questioning, why is he not around? Why is he not coming in? All this, whatever. And so when it came time to do the graphic novel, I was like, how do I want to tell this? Well, when the spirit animals and stuff kind of came in, I was like, you know what? Let's flip-flop this. And instead of being the kid's mental struggle, let's look at it from the adult perspective. Because a lot of us look at adults and be like, well, they're grown-ups, they know better, they've got everything all figured out. But truly, they're just like everybody else, where they have their own struggles. And so I really kind of wanted to show that and be like, yeah, he's mid-30s and he screwed up in life, but that doesn't mean that he can't get over that hump and make up for that lost time. That it's never too late to do that.
No, absolutely. And I think you really captured that like perfectly. I really love the concept behind this a lot, and everything that kind of just goes into this. I know, like for me, like I used to be a pretty popular Twitch streamer. I was almost partnered twice, had a pretty big following, and I kind of had my fall. And it's like you're speaking, and I keep thinking about myself, like with keeping it geekly. Like keeping it geekly is kind of like my redemption back into it. And like I'm just like, damn, dude, is this about me? Like this is hitting every spot perfectly.
That's what I want. See, like that's the takeaway from it, is I want it to be personal. That people are like, you know what, this is real. Like it's not what I call like a Hollywood movie type thing, to where they're trying to pull on your heartstrings, but it just doesn't feel right. And that's where I think Brian really knocked it out of the park, is to where he truly understands people and how they talk and how they feel, and he can articulate that within the scripting to where everything is 100% like, this resonates with me. And that's my biggest thing when I'm doing something, is like, if somebody changes or sees something within themselves, then I've done my job.
No, absolutely.
You know? That's what I'm saying.
So real quick, before we dive in, because I do want to take a look at the campaign, break it down with you, and go through the different tiers. But before we do that, like, how much darts experience did you have before this? Like, were you an avid player? Was it something that you had to kind of do a lot of extensive researching in? You know, what was that like for you?
I played a bit as a kid, and to kind of go back, so Brutal Moose influenced the story, but as a kid in my shop at the house, we had a darts board up in there, and we would go in there as kids and just kind of, you know, flip them upside down, and toss them like a throwing knife or something. Like we would do different stuff or underhand tosses or anything, and that kind of carried over to the story of us just screwing around in there and having fun throwing, because darts as a concept, you're just standing there throwing at a board, right? And so how do we make that fun? And so just that kid experience of getting like 60 foot behind the dartboard and throwing it as hard as we can, you know, and trying to change the dynamic of the sport has carried over its way into the comic. But when it comes to rules and all that kind of stuff, I had to deep dive and research into all that kind of stuff, because it's something that's not like that prevalent in pop culture. I mean, we have professional darts, but it's much like bowling. You
don't see them on like the Olympics and stuff. Yeah,
you're not going to see it all over. And so when I committed to darts as being the sport, it was okay, I'm going to have to figure out how we're going to do this, how we're going to show this, make it have an impact, because it's not easy like baseball, football, soccer, etc. And so it was one of those things to where it was like deep dive, make it as realistic as possible, but also put those, what I'm calling shonen elements into it to make it to where it's gripping to where we can do it.
So, and let's finish on that note. With the dart players, you said they're able, when they're throwing the darts, it like takes on the form of an animal. So what's that look like? Are they battling each other? What's the actual game look like between these characters?
So when you know somebody's going to be a prospect when it comes to darts, is they develop this thing called a Wisp, and that's what we called the powers. And when I explained it to Fernando doing the art, I was like, you remember when Gohan goes Super Saiyan 2 for the first time, and
so
he's got
awesome.
his little lightning bolts going around him and stuff? I was like, that right there, that's the Wisp. And when you can hone that and perfect that, you develop a spirit animal. And I'll use in the second page on DoubleOut #1, I used Brutal Moose as Ian as the world setting on that, and his obviously was a moose for a spirit animal. And so he's already a pro player in this world, and so he kind of sets up the world to where he's practiced, honed his skills. He's actually the greatest darts player, but we're not that far into the story yet.
He's probably going to eat that up, isn't he?
Yeah. And so when I sent it over there to him, and Fernando killed it art-wise with him. I mean, like, he nailed his likeness and everything. And so it's really just a manifestation of what's inside them, essentially. So it's a true Native American like spirit animal concept, but being materialized into the darts. Now, when it comes to battling each other, they don't, because you're throwing to a dartboard. But in this world of darts, you'll find out in volume 2 and stuff, the professional dart game is a whole lot different than a bar game of darts.
Okay.
And so you'll see kind of those changes when it gets to there, because you're gonna have to make adjustments when it comes to. I almost screwed up and gave away some of the plot there.
Oh, you're good. You're good. No worries.
I held myself back because I almost started giving away a little bit, and I was like, "Whoa, I don't need to do that just yet."
No, I'm good. I'm good at getting that out of people.
It's gonna change quite a bit, and it'll be a change for the dart game that we know nowadays.
So we have J. Michael Miller in the chat saying, so hyped to get my copies. Yeah, this looks like such an outstanding read.
Well, thank you, Jay.
The prices for the tiers were really good, too. Speaking of that, let's go ahead. Let's start breaking down. Let's dive into the Kickstarter. We'll go through the tiers and kind of everything in between. So here we are checking out the Kickstarter of DoubleOut, issue #2, the Intoxicating Shonen Darts comic. Continue the true-to-life journey of Jin Suzuki. I cannot pronounce that last name.
Suzuki.
I was so close and I just gave up.
Yeah, you had it and quit halfway.
Redemption. Does it come with a deal with the devil issue 2 of 8 for DoubleOut? So you have 8 issues planned all together?
Yes, sir. They're already completely written. That was my thing going into it. Going back to not doing my research ahead of how comics work, I got everything written ahead of time. Like, everybody goes issue by issue, that kind of doing it. I didn't know any better, so I was like, this is the story I want to tell, and got that all written out. So everything issue-wise is completed for the most part.
That is so awesome. We're at $777 of $800, so only $33 away. For anyone that is watching, there is the Kickstarter link. Come check it out with us, and be sure to let us know if you back. So you got 34 backers, 55 hours to go. I mean, you're in the home stretch, but I'm pretty confident you're going to be able to get funded. I mean, it's right there. You have literally 2 days and just $33 to go. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I feel great, man. Like I told you before we started with this, you know, you have your ups and downs when it comes to Kickstarter, to where you get kind of depressed a little bit, even though I'm happy with everything that's going along, but you want it to be, and I call this an American mentality, to where it's like, I want everything now, you know what I mean?
Oh, the gratification?
And, yes, 100%. And so you go through your ups and downs, but coming into this last little stretch and being a little bit more vocal on social media and put myself out there, it's really pushed this comic to get close to the goal. And then I'm pretty optimistic that we're going to hit goal from here, or at least I hope so. And so
awesome.
that was something that has been a relief, you know, kind of going into it.
So while we're looking here, give us a little breakdown of some of these characters. Right here is our main character of the hour, correct?
Yeah.
Jin?
So you see Jin right there. To his, I guess it's left on our side, the kid there is Ken, his son. And then to the right in the purple is Blade. This is the guy that he was playing darts with in issue 1 and lost a bet to, and ended up getting kicked out of the bar for that. These two behind them are Max, he's the bigger man there, and Robin. There are Crimson, which is the guy in red and back. He is the mob boss, so they are his henchmen essentially that do his dirty work.
So is this a video?
Yes, it is.
We can go ahead and watch it. The volume of this will drown your volume out, just to let you know, because you both are on the same audio channel.
Okay.
And we'll be able to hear it. You just won't be able to hear it on your end too. Just to give you that heads up.
Okay.
Awesome. 97% of its goal. Congratulations once again. So here is the story. Welcome back to the world of DoubleOut. And some of the preview art. So we had these scrolling during our conversation, but to kind of give a little bit of a breakdown since we're here, what are we kind of seeing right here?
So right here is that page that I mentioned before from issue 1. That's page 2, and this is kind of to set the world of the professional darts in this comic. So this is Ian Brutal Moose here.
Is this how he actually looks too?
Bar. Yes.
That's so awesome. I love it.
This is how he looks, and he's originally from Texas, but in a couple of his videos he likes flannel, and so I made sure, you know, I put in those little touches when it comes to the art style of it. And so he was used to kind of set up the world, and so here's where you can see like a manifestation of his spirit animal right here when he's throwing. The
moose, yeah, that looks so awesome.
And so it kind of sets up the world, and we used him for that. But if you take a little peek of the background there with the darts board, as you can see, it kind of looks a little bit different than what it does in our traditional. Of course, we have a similar darts board, but there's going to be different elements that come into play when we get to the pro dart scene than we do building up to that.
Well, yeah, and I would almost imagine that you would have to add that too to kind of spice it up a little bit, right? Like, there's only so much you could do there, because just having the regular board would present a lot of limitations, I feel. So let's go ahead and check this out. Welcome back to the world of DoubleOut. You are the owner of Obscure Productions as well. We didn't even talk about Obscure Productions. So
yes, sir.
Is that your label?
Yes. So I decided when I was going to do this, which I knew going in creatively, I wasn't only going to do comic books. And so I was like, I need to do something business-wise that sets up to where I'm not strictly limiting myself to comic books or coming up with multiple different businesses. So I was like, what can I do business-wise that kind of fits me brand-wise? And so I went with the name Obscure, because like I really feel like an enigma in the world, and so I was like, you know what, my stuff's kind of odd, it's kind of out there, and I was like, this kind of encompasses that, and so I kind of made it into a business. And so I've got a board game coming in the future, and then eventually that's going to splinter off into actual video games, and so and novels. I want to go back into novels and dip my toe back in there, and so I just wanted to have a publishing house essentially that I could do all that kind of stuff on. So that's so where cool. Obscure Production kind of came from.
So darts is the #1 sport on the planet, and the International Darts Federation is the major leagues. The greatest darts athlete in the world have one thing in common, and that is the ability to manifest a spirit animal within their darts throws. Hundreds of millions of people tunes in to watch the International Darts Federation, and a pro contract is a goal for all. So this kind of gives us an idea of what happens. We already had Ryan kind of break that down. For anyone that's interested, though, feel free to pause it to kind of read that. And here is a preview of issue 2. So again, we get a little bit deeper look at the cover. Crimson looks pretty ominous. I really love like the jacket, the hat. What are some of your inspirations for his design?
Okay, so he's real easy. Have you ever seen the anime of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood? Okay, so we've got in there, you've got Fury. And all I could think of when I was thinking of a mob boss was like how they set him up in that story. Like he's just super menacing, like the whole time. And I went to my artist and I was like, this is who I want you to kind of design, but we got to change it. I was like, whatever we do with it, we got to change it. But I was like, this is what I want. And I want it to be shrouded as much as we can. and so that's kind of how he came to be. Like there was really nothing more influence-wise than just how he was as a character in that story.
You know, I was really hoping you're going to say something about like where in the world is Carmen, like San Diego or something.
I can see that influence. I can totally see that.
Imagine if this whole entire time we couldn't find her because she's off running some like insane missions like in the underworld, like taking over the dark world. That's where she's been the whole time.
Yeah, and maybe you're onto something story-wise. I'm not going to give too much away, but I'm just saying. Maybe on something.
So after successfully funding issue 1 of DoubleOut, issue 2 is a continuation of Jin's journey of life redemption. I hope you want to continue following Jin and seeing where he goes from here. I wish I could tease more for issue 2, but to avoid spoilers, we'll say there's a 4-page preview below. So right here are some of the rewards tiers. Are these going to coincide with the reward tiers on the side?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. 2 birds, 1 stone. So for $5, you can get the digital copy of DoubleOut. For $8, you can get the digital copy of DoubleOut issue 1 and 2. So a pretty good price there, you know, for $8, $4 a pop. That's pretty awesome price. For $10, you're gonna get the physical copy of issue number 2. And then I want to say you also get the PDF of issue 2 with that too, right?
You will always get what's in the previous reward for the higher up as we go along.
And then for $15, you're going to get physical copies of DoubleOut issues 1 and 2. That is a phenomenal price. So for $5 more, you're going to get issue 1. You know, what made you want to bundle it so cheaply? That's really awesome.
I was hoping you would ask. So to go back to me doing little to no research going into it, I bought 200 copies before I even did the Kickstarter. And so I've already got them made. So I was like, might as well just give it a discount on number 2. If I pull in new people that way and they get to read this, I was like, I've already got it printed. I don't got to print anymore, and just do it that way. And so that was really my reasoning on that, was lowering it down, getting a good entry price, because my goal for everything is just to have people read the story that I want to tell, because that means more to me than anything else.
That is so awesome. Then 35 is another awesome tier 2. You get a physical copy of DoubleOut plus 2. Or issue 2, excuse me, plus issue a personalized avatar, and so what's the invite?
So the invite is the professional darts invite that Jin ends up getting to take us into our tournament arc of the story.
So like a little print?
Yeah, so
okay.
you'll have a print of that, and it'll be 100% with you and with the avatar. So it's a social media avatar. I did personalized ID badges for issue 1, and when my artist drew the avatars for those in our world, I was blown away with that, and I was like, we should just do social media avatars for issue 2, and then so once we have those, that's going to be integrated into the personalized invitation, and so like it's 100% like you're invited, all that, like setting it up into the world, and it's got your avatar there, your name, everything like that on there.
That is awesome, dude.
Yeah,
and
man.
then a keychain as well. So what is this keychain? Is this like a logo of the Federation?
The keychain is actually Jin's logo.
Okay.
So that's what everybody kind of wears a uniform, which we haven't really touched on, and it's really just based on their jackets. And so Jin's jacket is his uniform, but on the back side of it, he's got a patch on there, and so that's his uniform team for the story. And so that's what's used in that keychain right there.
And then you're also going to get a preview of issue 3. So how many pages of a preview are people going to get when they get this tier?
I always do 4, and that's just what I'm kind of comfortable with, and that's typically the norm. But you never know. It may end up being 8. I haven't really talked with the artist yet to figure out how much he wants to do on that, but definitely 4 for sure. And then set up that issue.
And then for $5 more, you're gonna get a physical of issue 1 too. So I love the extra price. Yeah, these are some awesome reward tiers. I think for your second campaign, this is great. I really love the visualization. One thing I hate is like when you have a Kickstarter having to scroll through like just so much.
Yeah.
So I really like how you condensed it down. Now
Well,
here's
thank you.
some of the goals too. So for $800, everyone will receive the reward and have their names printed on a producer's page. Ooh, let's go for issues 3 through 8. So that's awesome. At $1,000, everyone will get a digital making of art and script book. At $1,200, everyone will get an 8-track soundtrack. So you have a whole soundtrack made for this.
I have a soundtrack on it, and when you looked at that trailer up there, there's a 30-second preview in that. That's what the background music is in that trailer, is issue 2's specific soundtrack. And so for issue 1, there's a soundtrack. 3, 4, 5, etc., all the way down the line, has a soundtrack to it. And,
that's so cool.
I talked with Damian Becton about this on Twitter, to where, because his comic as well, Worlds Away, has a soundtrack to it because his character listens to music in the comic, and so he put a QR code that went specifically to that, and I just kind of offhand told him
that is fucking genius.
Yeah,
Holy
yeah,
crap.
100%. And when I talked to him about having a soundtrack with my comic, he was surprised by that, and then goes, dude, I'm kind of doing the same thing. And I was like, I'm a big person of multimedia. So how much creativity can I put into one thing, into where like comics, I'm like, let's introduce some music, maybe introduce something else. And so like I developed a soundtrack for that.
Was it hard like getting the timing and pacing? Because everyone reads differently, right? At a different pace?
So like with mine, what I did for the soundtrack was, what I got was the artist, he read the story and he told the story through the music. So it's not so much while you're reading along, but the highs and lows, it goes through the same flow as the comic book is written.
That's awesome.
So you'll know, oh, when this part hits, like if you listen to them separate, if you read one and then listen to it afterwards, you'd be like, this is when this page hits. This is when here, because you know those story beats with that music. And so that's kind of how I set that up.
So we also have at $1,500, everyone will get a DoubleOut postcard and sticker. $2,000, everyone will get a physical making of art script book. And then at $2,200, everyone will receive a digital preview of issue 3 for free. So that is cool. So is that regardless of if they got the...
Regardless. Everybody will get it. I'll send it over there.
Oh, that is awesome. So here is a 4-page teaser of issue 4. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Kind of get a little bit of a visualization of the Wisp starting to pop up right here.
Yes, sir.
They want him to do it again. So what's up also with the big scar on Jin's face? Is that a scar right here? Or is that like a tattoo?
So one of my big things is continuity when we come to art. And so I want things that happen like early on in an issue or anything to carry over until it truly heals. And so in issue 1, he gets kidnapped and kind of beat down a little bit. And so from issue 1, that carries over into issue 2, having that continuity, and we'll see his facial features and different kinds of stuff change over time along with the story as we go along. And so that's where that comes from. He didn't originally have that there. Yeah. And so I want to say on page 1 there, at the top, we left issue 1 with a cliffhanger of how he was going to throw the dart. So in issue 1, sorry for those of you that are just now picking up issue 1, but I'm going to talk about the end of it. We've got him kidnapped, and he's in Crimson's office right now, and Crimson wants him to prove himself by throwing a dart, because Jin is pleading to him to not give up on him and not give up on this debt and essentially kill him, right? And so we leave off on Jin throwing a dart, but as we can see here, we've got the third panel there in black and white, so that's Max kind of looking back on Jin throwing. We've already got the throw done, but we left off before the dart hit the board, and as you can see, he doesn't hit a bullseye. So
he's close though. It's close. No cigar.
But it's not good. So that's where Max steps in and kind of goes to bat for Jin, because he notices the Wisp in him.
Yeah, then right here is
that sets up this
Crimson, right?
Yes, sir.
So yeah, I love the way you have him. You have him like shrouded and kind of like more darker, and not really, you were able to really see him too well. And they I love this too. None of them really believe him, but this guy. And they want him to do it again.
One that notices it.
Yeah. And they want him to do it again, and produce it. Yeah. So it looks like Jin's starting to get in some trouble right here. Gets his arm grabbed up. And I love these facial expressions. You could tell this guy is like an enforcer looking guy, and Jin's just kind of like out on his luck. I love it. And then a little bit more of a closer of Crimson too. He does look like a really ominous guy. So what can you tell us about Crimson? I noticed that he's pretty scarred up too.
Yeah, he is. That's something I can't super deep dive into.
I get it.
Like I say, you kind of accidentally hinted on something with the Carmen and San Diego thing. Sever, there's no influence with that. But story-wise, there's something that down the line we get to know a little bit more about Crimson and really what he's doing behind the scenes.
You know, like the split second in my mind when I thought to ask that question, I was like, okay, do I ask this question? I wonder what type of response. Yeah, and I'm gonna start doing it more and more. So here is a soundtrack preview for issue 1. You want us to check this out real quick? Is this
that's
something?
The complete track, so that's gonna be a 3-minute. It's up to you.
So what we could do is maybe get for anyone that's interested, right here's the link, and we'll just put it right there. If you guys are interested, you could just check it out yourself. Listen to it while you go through the preview.
Yeah. That's the full track right there, and I put the first 4 pages of... I think I put the first 4 pages. It may just been the issue cover. But I wanted to make sure that soundtrack got heard, regardless of if we ever hit any of those goals to where the soundtrack gets out there. I wanted to make sure like that gets listened to.
Do you listen to the soundtrack a lot, like when you're like lifting and stuff?
I do. Well, I do when I start thinking about storylines and different kinds of stuff with this, because the artist really nailed the world of DoubleOut. And so when I need to get put in that zone, I just put on that music and I'm like, oh yeah, here's where we're going with the story. Here's where it's going. You
start like wanting to throw darts. I get it.
Yeah. And I'm like, volume 2 is going to go like this. And then I kind of go through it. And so he really nailed the world of DoubleOut with that.
That is so awesome. And then let's go ahead, talk about your amazing co-creator. So give us a little bit of a breakdown of Brian Hawkins.
So Brian, right now, I keep pushing him as one of the greatest script writers out there right now. And he's always going to push back on that, but I genuinely mean that. I mean, he's so prolific right now. Like every day he's got a new comic coming out. Like doesn't matter if it's editor or script writing or his own comics. He's constantly grinding and putting out new material every day. And what he does, like I said early on, is he's got a knack for making things real. And so he does dialogue better than pretty much anybody that I've read comic book wise. Now, like I say, I've got a limited scope on that, but I know good writing when I see it.
I would say 4 years is a pretty good...
He's 100% there.
I would say 4 years is pretty good experience.
Well, thank you. It feels out of place when somebody's like, been reading comics for 30 years or whatever, and I'm like, oh yeah, I don't have that much experience.
So, I mean, at what cost? Like 30 years? I mean, let's break this down on like a level that you're more like, in tune with. Like, I mean, you could work out for 30 years, but if you're only doing like bicep curls, as opposed to 4 years of doing like a full body,
And thank you. I don't really put it in perspective like that, but thank you for that, because that does make a lot of sense. There's a lot of people that work out for 10 to 20 years, but it's half-assed and never really get to that intermediate or pro level. And so I need to start changing how I look at that and being like, I put in the time to actually study this,
Yeah, you need to start learning to love yourself, Ryan. Let's get it.
Hey,
We're starting here
I'm
day
getting
one.
there. Like I told
Day
you
one,
before
baby.
we went live, you kind of pushed the envelope. Since I'm doing this, you pushed the envelope to help me put myself out there a little bit more when it comes to the creative side. I've always been good in the gym and personal training wise and nutrition wise, but when it comes to this, I always kind of felt like an outsider. But since you didn't make me sign up for this, but since you kind of forced my hand,
I held the dart to his head.
You did. You were like, you're gonna throw, and you better produce the wisp when you throw, because you're gonna get knocked out if we don't do that. And so after signing up for this, it kind of opened the door of being like, I do belong in this industry, or I do kind of feel like I can hang with these other guys. And everybody else in the community has been great too on Twitter. Like they've been accepting of me and spitballing different ideas. So it's been great to be a little bit more confident in all that kind of stuff.
Isn't it crazy to get in that mentality too? I know for me, we were talking about this earlier. Like I didn't feel like I had a place in this. I'm just the person who reads comics and talks about comics. It was hard for me to understand like why people wanted to come on the show. I really didn't like. I love my show, but I didn't see the value that people saw in it. Because for me, it's just like I'm just doing this because I love to talk about comics. But other people,
I always look at it as like, why would I go do something if so and so's doing it better?
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And we shouldn't think like that. There's always a market or audience for like different kind of stuff or different perspectives. But I've always looked at it as like, I'll use fitness videos on YouTube for an example. I've been told for years, you need to start doing that. You need to start doing Instagram, all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, why? Somebody else is already given the quality information that I would be given already out there. Why would I need to do that? But they are right, because what you do is providing a totally different service than what anybody else does.
And
yeah,
that goes into the comic like hand in hand. They like that every story has already been told, but your story hasn't, because you have a unique twist on that story. So it's like that saying just kind of like bleeds over in every different facet. And like once you kind of really sit down and like start to break it down, like you really start seeing, it took me literally looking at my calendar, because someone wanted me to book a launch party for him. So I was like, let me actually write this down to get a visualization if I could do this. And then I looked and I'm like, oh my God, dude, like the last 3 months I've been booked out a month straight, every month. Like I'm like, this, I think I need to just start embracing this, instead of faking it to make it. Like I'm making it, I'm doing it, like,
And that's where I say just kind of jump in and just throw yourself into it, to where like that was my mindset with the Kickstarter. Is just like, it'll swim if it's supposed to swim. And so like if you throw it in there, you throwing out the schedule and kind of book yourself, you saw that dividends to where it started paying off, and you were like, oh, everybody's booking for this, so it's swimming on its own. And you're like, I can go all in.
I started getting really smart with it, because I mean, like you said, you can't swim until you jump. You can't swim until you jump in. And I used to schedule these by hand. It would take like 3 hours a week.
Ooh.
People would just send me their schedules. I'd had my DMs, and like I don't know if if me and you we seem kind of similar. Like when you look at your DMs and you have like 55 missed messages, and you just get overwhelmed. You're like, oh my God, where do I even begin? And I was double booking people, and then I found Calendarly. If it wasn't for Calendarly, I would be screwed, because it does all that for me. So it's like finding out like you said, your weak points and how to make them stronger.
And seek out those weak points. It's not a bad thing to have weak points. Like everybody's got weak points. Once you acknowledge those, you can look into all the different things, especially with the internet now, to where, like I say, where I found Fernando and found Brian and stuff, to where if this was 20 years ago, I would have had nowhere to start. This idea would just be stuck in the head. But I was like, you know what? I can't draw. I haven't wrote a script ever. So I was like, let's do this the right way and put it in the hands of people that know what they're doing.
So,
yeah.
I was gonna say, speaking of that, let's break down the other half of the creative team too, because I noticed that we forgot the artist.
Yeah. So Fernando and Aston, they've been phenomenal in terms of artist. And I know I'm talking up my creators, but I wouldn't say it if I truly didn't believe it, to where their art is absolutely incredible. Like there's certain comics that I look at that I get turned off on just by the art. And other people may think something different, but this truly struck what I'm looking for when I look for a comic book. And they were able to hit that and then take that beyond that, because when it comes to the spirit animal and the Wisp and everything, I gave them like a concept, but they took it and ran with it and made it better than what I was kind of wanting when it did it. And
That's so
so
awesome.
if it wasn't for them and artist mind in general of being able to see stuff, this would be nowhere. And so they're phenomenal when it comes to the art.
And then here are some of the previous works from the mentioned team. So here's Brian's Black Cotton that he's worked on.
Yep.
And then here's Nemo's The Desert. This looks gorgeous too. This is from the illustration team. Their comic together. This looks awesome.
Yeah.
So
and
here,
that one. So they're from Argentina, and I believe they have an English copy of that now. It's, you may or may not find that in English. I'm not 100% sure, but if you look for it, I'm sure you can find it.
Oh, I love that too. So here is your goal as a creator. So why don't you give us a little bit of a breakdown of this part?
Yeah, so like it says on there, it's my second campaign ever on Kickstarter. Well, technically my third. I tried to do issue 1 for about a week and realized I screwed up. And so I took it down and I was like, you know what? I went about this all wrong, because I went into it thinking, and this was dumb, but thinking, oh, I've got a finished product. It's the greatest DARTS comic book ever written. Turns out it's the only DARTS comic book ever written. So it's the greatest comic book.
Yeah, technically it still is the greatest. Yeah.
So it is the greatest. But I went into it thinking, the art's phenomenal. The script's great. I was like, it's going to take care of itself. And so I really went into it a little too gung-ho and thinking it would just work out when I did it. And so I had to pull that down and kind of start over. So it's technically my third Kickstarter campaign. And like I said early on, my goal isn't like the financial side of it. Like I say, I paid pretty much everything up front. And I was willing to do that, work in my jobs and kind of stuff like that, to put this art out there. My goal is to have people read this. I want people to read the story, resonate with it, and tell me about it, because I want to hear that feedback, even if it's positive or negative. I want to learn just as much as I want to learn about Kickstarter. I want to learn about everything else in life. And so as much of a community as I can develop from that, that's my goal when it comes to the Kickstarter in general, or even the future Kickstarters, is play it, read it, whatever, with any of my stuff. As long as it's out in the world, I'm happy.
Oh, that is so awesome. And then important, just a little bit letting people know, if they pledge, only give what you can afford, even if it's just a few dollars, because supporting any amount obviously will help, but don't put yourself in like a financial burden.
Absolutely.
I also love this too, the call to action to share it on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I don't see that a whole lot, but I think this is an important thing to do, because a lot of people, that call to action, like for someone like, just normally reading it, like they might get triggered and be like, okay, well, let me do that. Like sometimes that is all it takes.
And even just that, you don't even have to back it. Like I ask people just to retweet. That's backing it for me. If somebody retweets it or shares it or whatever, that's backing it. That's just as good as $1 given, or just as good as a pledge given. Any of that's fine with me. And one thing that I do when people back is I message them immediately and reach out to them and be like, hey, if you tag me in a post when you back this, I'll send you the PDFs right now. And I get that kind of out there from the get-go, because like I say, I just want people to read it. They could theoretically cancel their pledge after that. I like to think people don't do that, but I just want people to read it. So
do you ever worry that you might, like, for people who don't retweet it, might get upset about that, having to wait?
No, because typically they reply back and be like, don't worry about it. I don't read PDFs, or I don't do, they'll typically respond to those messages, and contact's fairly been pretty good.
Oh, well, you make sure you message them also. I mean, that's almost like they lose the chance if they don't.
Yeah, so everybody gets a personal message, because it means the world to me that somebody's taking the time to even come to the page.
So what are you gonna do when you start hitting hundreds of backers? Like
I'm gonna send it out to 100 people.
My man Ryan's gonna have arthritis in a couple years.
Hey man, that's the goal. If we get there, if I'm lucky enough to be any of these big time Kickstarters is what I'm going to call it, to where I've got that many people, man, nothing will make me happier than sitting down for a couple hours and messaging people and talking back and forth and getting that over.
You know, and that's kind of how I took things too. Like when I started doing this, I was doing like one interview a month. My first one was in November, and then my second one was in February. And I remember looking at February, and I think I had like 10 interviews maybe. And that, to me, that was like a crap load.
Yep.
I'm booked every single day now. And like, I just remember like messaging people, messaging them like, here's the links here, here's what we're doing. In the beginning, like, I'm like, okay, well, I need to either make sure I'm going to do this, be professional about this, or not do it at all. And like no matter how high that number gets, and maintaining that mentality really, like, it does a lot for your brand and for your product.
That's what I'm saying about Twitter now, is to where I look at it as a job, to where I need to put in the same amount of time as I would for personal training or nutrition or any of that kind of stuff, to where I'm like, I've got to sit down and actually think about my posts and think about communicating with different people and doing all this. So
it's a nightmare.
But I've come to love it. I'm a real systematic person. Like I tell people all the time, if you gave me a job on an assembly line that just told me exactly I've got to do this to this, then I will be in heaven. And so when it comes to like Twitter and sitting down and turning it into a job, I'm like, oh, I've just got to do A to B, A to B, A to B. I like that kind of stuff.
No, I love it too. And it does help your growth. It helps your growth a ton. But like for me, like, I look at my algorithms and my numbers, and I'm tweeting out 1,000 to 2,000 tweets a month. On my job for a Cody page is like 200 tweets, to give you an idea.
Yeah.
And it's like, the thing is, like, I don't just like copy and paste response. I make sure every single one is like somewhat personable. Like, and I look at campaigns. Like I always do the work in progress threads or the self-promote threads, and I tried it my best. And my biggest thing is like, I'm systematic too. So like if something happens where a bump in the road happens and then I get pushed back, now I have like 3 days worth of stuff to systematically go through, and then I start getting overwhelmed. That plate just starts getting bigger and bigger. That's kind of what inspired me to take a couple of days off recently, because like I wanted to just have time to just like reset, like mentally just reset, come back stronger, because like, I don't know, you get in that mindset where you're like, if I stop doing this, it's not gonna, the bubble's gonna pop. And it's so hard to break out of that, because
and I'm glad you took that time off. I reached out on Twitter and was like, take care of you, man. So I'm glad everything's coming down and getting through all that, but I don't want to touch too much on that. I just wanted to say
I appreciate that.
I'm happy that you're good, man.
Thank you. And that's, I need to go through that thread and give all my thanks. And like, I was like, today's going to be the day I do that. Like, so I actually have like my little journal, like right here. This is my little thing, my little creative process. And I'll write down my list, so I'll be like, right here, like organize repile, or, set up dates for these people, and that's how I do it. For me, like that gratification comes crossing that off the list and like working down it. Yeah, dude, it's awesome. We have like a lot of similarities in mindsets. I love conversations like this where we can kind of, talk about the book, but also get like a lot of real, like, talk in as well. So I think we pretty much covered your Kickstarter in its entirety, correct?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Let's go ahead and start wrapping things up. So let me get this moved over here. And my man Ryan, for anyone that is like on the fence of backing, we have 2 days left basically. What would you like to say to them directly to kind of help push them over that barrier, to help them, back your project and get issue 2 in their hand?
Well, not so good at selling just yet, but I'll go back to, this is the greatest darts comic ever written. So I don't know what more to tell you. That nobody else can really put the greatest one ever written on anything. So I'm just telling you right there, it's phenomenal. But if at any point any of this story that of somebody that's gone through hardships with their father or different kind of stuff like that, this may resonate with you. You may see something, or if you have a friend that has gone through that kind of stuff, this may help you open your eyes and better understand what they've gone through and build up y'all's relationship from that, because you may see things from a different perspective by seeing how Jin, the adult, the dad, struggles along that way. And so that's kind of my pitch on that end. But when it comes to the dart side of it, hey man, there's cool spirit animals when they throw. So like, what more do you want?
No, I love it. Hey, we're gonna have to you're gonna have to give us some of these spirit animals that you have in mind. You got anything you could drop or leak? Any cool ones to look forward to?
I definitely can't give away Jin's, because that's part of the story. But there's hints along the way in DoubleOut. But there is going to be a character later in the tournament arc named Tuma, and she's from Egypt. And so the way that I kind of set these up was really like a punch out like idea, if you've played the NES game or the Wii remake, to where they're all country focused, like where they're from, country of origin. And so she's Egyptian, and so she's going to have a sphinx like spirit animal, and from the early concepts of that is going to look pretty awesome.
That's so, yeah, I love that. I love how you could branch out with this too, and like there, it just seems like the world aspect of it, the world building, like there's so much raw potential that you can go with, especially like doing like the countries and stuff. Like that's really cool.
Yeah. And here's what's going to be weird when it comes to this. So Jin's story arc is going to be 2 volumes. For volume 3, and this may be weird and it may be a turnoff, I don't know, but I'm going to switch it into a manga. The story structure is going to change a little bit. I'm not going to talk about why, but it's going to, and that may turn people off, but that's the way that I see the story in my head, and so I want to tell it that way. So when it gets to that point, it's really going to change into a true shonen manga and tell the story that way.
So any plans to kind of like revamp the other 3 to have them fit that format?
And I may. That's been thought about a little bit. What I just don't know, because I'm gonna kind of develop a base of DoubleOut from those comics and carry that over. So I shouldn't even call it the same series. It's just going to be in the same world, but it's going to have similar characters and everything like that. But in my head, it's a continuation of the story.
Kind of like
but I guess the better way, sorta, I should word it that way. It's a continuation of the story in my head, but I can see how it turns people off if it switches.
You already got me bubbling. I'm like, man, are we gonna see Jin's kid take on DARTS? Like, is this where you're getting at? Like,
I'm not going to talk about it. You can fish it out of me, because I would tell you everything right now. You would fish it out of me. I can't go into that.
Hey, we'll back it up. You know, on this note, I think it is perfect time for us, because I got the reel going. I'm ready to cast it, but we'll pull back. Let's start wrapping things up. I always love ending on this one question in particular, because as much as this is something for you to really promote your book and your story, it is a learning tool for new people too. New people watch the show all the time, and you know, they learn little tidbits of wisdom here and there. So with that being said, for anyone that's really struggling to get their own book started, to get their own story going, and they just really can't, they're having trouble maybe finding their weak spots and figuring out how to make those strengths, like what advice would you give them to kind of be able to work through that?
First, before I answer this question, I didn't really touch on this earlier, but when it comes to obscure production, the goal of my stuff in general is eventually to start funding other people to be creative.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, I want to put the funds up front, so other people that don't have the opportunity to do what I did and pay an artist ahead of time and pay a script writer and that kind of stuff, if they got a story to tell, I want them to tell it. I want them to have their creative avenue out there. And so that's the eventual goal. I want to step into publishing and then step into funding on that side when it comes to that. So hopefully in the future, that stuff will be taken care of. But for the people right now that are looking at that, it's like, you've got to either have a friend or build a relationship with somebody that's going to be 100% honest with you. And so literally just spitball the idea to somebody. If they tell you it sucks, it probably sucks. And then be like, okay, I'll take that. And then try to change it a little bit. Like, and ask for specific feedback back from that. Now, when it comes to developing a comic out of that idea, so let's say we get past that goal and we start going into it. We've got so many websites now, like Fiverr and Upwork and Reddit and Twitter. You can even find people to where it's like, reach out to the community. I know me in particular will answer anybody that sends a question over, and I can point you in a direction of like 20 to 30 artists right now, or I could point you in the direction of 20 to 30 script writers right now. And the community is good like that, to where we've developed a base of guys that follow each other. And so even if I didn't do it, somebody else will reach out and be like, hey man, glad you're here. Let's look at this, or let's do whatever, and then kind of send something over to you guys. But I will say, don't think or expect like free or cheap labor.
Oh yeah.
Like, no, I just want to preface that, because I know a lot of people go in with like a misunderstanding of page rates or anything like that. And I want to make sure they're artists just like you, that you want to be. So pay them what they're worth. And if they try to undercut other people's prices and stuff, tell them they're worth more than that, because they're going to need that backing too. So just support the community if you're going to go into that and go all that kind of stuff. But if you had no means of getting it, then I guess learn how to draw, learn how to do all that kind of stuff. But
learn how to get it right.
Part, we're great. Yeah. You know,
no, that is
like
awesome.
You're going to do what you're passionate about. So go for it.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ryan. That was such an awesome breakdown. I always love hearing different people's and creators' perspective on that. Man, what an awesome show. This was your first interview, and look, you were nervous about it, you were anxious about it, and I couldn't even tell. I couldn't even tell that this was your first interview by the end of it.
I talk for a living. I will give you that. So I do this all day as a personal trainer, to where I talk with my clients 24/7, because they can't talk back to me while they're lifting, right? Some of them can, but for the most part, I'm just talking their ear off for about an hour, so I can waffle all day long. But man, I'm still nervous, but I hope it went well, and I really enjoyed
this
it.
was good. This was
great on your end of making me feel.
You've been great on your end too. This was a killer show. I thought we had really good rapport. We had really good conversation, but it is getting to that point of the day where I do need to start getting ready for work. I have a couple hours, need to take my significant. I always like taking her on a walk, just enjoying the day, because I get so wrapped up doing this, and you gotta make time for the people in your life. So I need to make some time for mine. And with that being said, guys, we need to be wrapping it up. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on, breaking down DoubleOut with us, and I would love to get you back on for issue 3 whenever you run the campaign for that.
I'll 100% be on.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, absolutely. Guys, everyone watching, I hope you all have a fantastic Thursday, but most importantly, keep it geekly.